I have been playing a lot of League of Legends recently for some reason. I have no idea why, but I have been. I haven't really played since high school, but I've been getting kinda back into it and having a lot of fun with some of my close friends. So I'm doing what I want to do, and that's combining two of my passions, like Pathfinder and video games, in ways I don't usually get to do. There's a chance this video might not perform well, but hey, stick around, check it out, give me that watch time, and maybe YouTube will actually like it. Who knows? Let me know down in the comments if you're interested in this kind of silly list content. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and give every champion in League of Legends a Pathfinder class. Honestly, I don't know what to expect from this. I haven't gone into this like pre-writing anything. Some of these are probably going to be super easy, some of these are probably going to be a little bit harder, and I have no idea how I'm gonna classify some of these characters. Some of them might be a little bit of a stretch, but let's go ahead and jump in with Atrox. Atrox is a difficult one to start with. Honestly, I really wish he wasn't first, because he does a lot of different things, but it's all very blood and healing focused, and there's no Pathfinder 2e class that really dives into like blood and self-healing with damage. I think the best class we could possibly give Atrox is Barbarian, because there's just nothing close enough to classify him as. It might just be the Fury Instinct, honestly. If there was a Blood Instinct Barbarian, that would probably be right on the money, but unfortunately there's nothing that really hits Atrox, so we're gonna go with Barbarian. Definitely gonna need to speed this up, otherwise we're gonna be here for 3 hours. Ahri. Probably a sorcerer, if not an oracle. She gets her magic from her bloodline as a kitsune, or whatever they're calling her now, and I believe sorcerer is right on the money. Everything she can do, she was born with the ability to do, and that just screams sorcerer to me. Akali. Now this may surprise some people. I'm almost guaranteeing that Akali is a swashbuckler. By flipping around, slowing down opponents, throwing them off guard, with the ability to still stealth and hide and whatnot, that all screams swashbuckler to me. She does a little bit too much to be considered a rogue, so I believe swashbuckler, basically gaining panache as like her abilities that mark enemies, sounds perfect. Her ultimate is basically a finisher anyway. Swashbuckler is just perfectly in line. It might be easy to look at Akshan and just think, he has a gun, gunslinger, but I think he's actually a ranger that uses firearms, specifically a flurry ranger. He shoots really fast, with his passive allowing him to basically shoot a second time really quickly before needing to effectively reload. So I believe he is a ranger with a firearm with a clipped weapon, so especially when he does his rope swing, he can just shoot really fast, which if you're a flurry ranger, you can shoot 3 times with your firearm at reduced multiple attack penalties, and I think that works perfectly for Akshan. Alistar is just an animal instinct barbarian. Is there anything else to it? He doesn't use weapons, he just runs in and is a cow. Case closed. Amumu is an interesting case where their role in the game may not reflect the class they are when it comes to their powers. Amumu is a tank, meaning he can take a bunch of damage, but everything he does is incredibly magical. It's also necromantic in its origin. He wasn't born with it, he died and was resurrected with it. I think Amumu, now hear me out, I think Amumu is a mystery of death oracle. Risen from the dead and just seeking answers to his own new life, I think that works perfectly. It gives him that magic, which explains that. It obviously doesn't explain why he's so tanky, but to be fair, that doesn't make sense anyway. Anivia is difficult because Anivia is a bird. But I think Anivia is just plain and simple an ice spell focused wizard. She flings ice spells with utmost precision and mastery, and no one else, she doesn't really do much else. She throws out ice spells, that's what she does, she's just a specialist wizard. Annie, same deal, she throws out fire spells, maybe you could call Annie a witch with Tibbers as her familiar, but there's currently nothing in Pathfinder that allows a familiar of a witch to grow into a giant size. That's a cool feat idea. Paizo, get on that. You could also consider her a summoner, with Tibbers as her Eidolon, but their health is not connected. If Tibbers dies, Annie does not die, and that pretty much cancels the summoner out completely, and the only reason I'm allowing that to cancel it is because there's a champion later on that perfectly fits that bill. So I'm going to go with Witch Wizard, slightly leaning towards Witch because Tibbers does exist, and I do like the idea of Tibbers being her familiar, that she can just summon with a massive fireball somehow. It works out. Aphelios is a gunslinger. What do you want from me? Ashe is a ranger. What do you want from me? Aurelion Sol is space? I think Aurelion Sol is another oracle with a mystery of the cosmos. It just makes too much sense. He can fly super fast, he can float. It all makes sense with the curse or mystery of the oracle bonuses that lets you like jump higher and turn gravity off. It's honestly kind of perfect. Azir is another tough one because at first you'd think summoner. He summons things, they attack, but he is not connected to them, but he is. But he can also have multiple. It's hard to say whether Azir is a summoner or a wizard who specializes in conjuration. I think I'm actually gonna go with Summoner for Azir because his Soldiers of Sand that he summons are based on his own power. You know, they don't stay the same power as he levels up, they scale with him. As Azir gets stronger, so do the soldiers. Whereas if you're a wizard with conjuration, your summoning spells are gonna summon different, stronger things, not the same thing, but stronger. So I'm going with Azir as a summoner. Bard, I'm going with Cleric. He heals, he puts down little bells, he throws out stuns, which are basically the day's cantrip, and he can make his allies immortal for a short time, which maybe that exists in a high-level spell, I don't know. He just screams Cleric to me. Blitzcrank is tough, like he's a robot, so the first thing you want to scream is Inventor, but is that right? I will argue that Blitzcrank is a monk. Blitzcrank is an android monk with some kind of homebrewed feat that he can reach out and pull things to him, and he's all physical. He's all about knocking things up and pulling them across. Running super fast is one of his abilities. The only thing that doesn't get super explained is his ult, but we can explain that with the android feat that lets you do a massive area of effect damage. Blitzcrank is an android monk. If Annie is a witch, Brand is definitely the wizard, just throwing out fire spells. Plain and simple, he might even have the Elementalist class archetype. Honestly, yeah, he and Anivia probably both have the Elementalist class archetype. Braum is a champion. Is there a question here? He sticks to allies, he stands near them, he assists them when they take damage, and he blocks people from damaging them. He is clearly just a champion. The question is he a Liberator, Paladin, or Redeemer? I think he's a Redeemer, honestly. He doesn't help his allies move faster, he doesn't attack when his allies are attacked, but he does do damage back to people who attack him, mostly through his own attacks, but I think it's the closest thing we've got. Caitlyn is a way of the sniper gunslinger. I know it's easy, but some of these just have to be. Not to be redundant, but I do think Camille is also an android monk. The alternative is that she is a normal human ancestry and has the archetype that gives you the prosthetic, the Thunder Dynamo, Power Dynamo, something like that. It'll be on screen, which is also possible and could be super cool. Cassiopeia is a tough one. Honestly, she might be a druid. All of the poison and toxic damage she does is very nature, primal spell list style. You don't see a lot of poison outside of primal. Maybe some acid arrow could be argued as a wizard, but I really don't see her as a wizard, and the next best thing I can think of is a beastkin, snake beastkin druid. See, Cho'Gath's difficult, because Cho'Gath is straight up just a monster. That is not a player character class. If I had to give him one, all he does is scream and eat people. He's definitely got magic, but it's not like traditional magic, and I can't just throw Oracle at him for some reason. That doesn't make any sense. Do I just make him a bard because his screams do damage, and no other class in the game can do damage with their screams? I can't make Cho'Gath a bard, right? Right? But all of his abilities like slow things down, but he doesn't buff his allies, but a bard doesn't have to. This is hard. Nothing else fits. When I started making this video, I never thought I'd make Cho'Gath a bard, but here we are. Corki is difficult. I think Corki is almost definitely an inventor. He's just homebrewed it so that he can like fly in his armor, and also his armor has a gun sticking out of it, which would basically just be the plane, and I think that's the only way to explain Corki. Darius is just a great axe-focused fighter. That's all there is to it. He swing, he hit, you die. Diana might actually be a monastic weaponry monk. She is so mobile, her speed is almost unmatched with her ability to dart between targets. Now she has a little bit of magic she can throw out, like with her Crescent Strike, and I think that can be represented by the monk's key abilities, so that's why I'm saying Diana is also a monk. Dr. Mundo's just gotta be a barbarian, right? Like, I don't know what instinct would work for him, but he's just a sack of hit points. He's just there to get hit. The closest thing we have in Pathfinder is the Barbarian's ability to give themselves temporary hit points, whereas Mundo just straight up heals himself. Tabletop RPGs, especially D20 systems, tend to avoid self-healing as much as they can, so I'm gonna say Barbarian, I guess just Fury Instincts. One of his ability is just hit them really hard, and that just screams Fury to me. Also, what you might not expect, Draven is 100% a thrown weapon barbarian who maxed charisma. He is a dex-based charisma barbarian, which is hilarious, and he just uses throwing axes all day, every day with a winning smile. Echo gets tough. He's wibbly-wobbly, he's timey-wimey, there's not a lot of time magic in Pathfinder. He's also incredibly adept with martial weapons. He does a lot of bonking and throwing things, so it's not all magic. In fact, it's all science. So wait, he's just an inventor. He's a weapon inventor. That's what it is. He is a weapon inventor that has been homebrewed to give him slight temporal abilities. Now, he can't like rewind time, but he can rewind himself, which I think is super cool. And yeah, I think that's like a homebrewed weapon inventor, and I dig it. Sorry if you've heard like crunching in the background. My dog's been chewing on her bone, and like, that's the only way I can keep her quiet when I record, so apologies. But if you like Doggo, you should like the video. Because this many people aren't subscribed. Wow, I know that percentage. Can you believe that many people are watching and have not subscribed to the channel? Crazy, right? But seriously, just do it for the dog. Don't do it for me. Do it for her. Elise is a druid. Nice and easy. Wild order, she shapeshifts. Easy as that. Oh, we've got some easy ones here. Evelyn's a rogue. She hides until it's time to pop out, sneak attack, deal the bonus damage, maybe debilitating strike and slow you down, and just finish you off. Simple. Believe it or not, Ezreal, I think, is a sorcerer. I know he's an AD carry, but all of his stuff is throwing magic at you that just happens to deal physical damage. You know what else deals physical damage? That spell that I forget the name of but is on screen right now. I think that's what he casts most of the time. His Q, that Mystic Shot, it does physical damage, it's bludgeoning damage. And things like the ability to teleport a short distance and whatnot, that's all sorcerer to me. Though I guess maybe he's a wizard, because it's all trained. He wasn't born with the ability, it's all his suit. And he's learned to control. Yeah, no, actually, wizard? I never expected Ezreal to be a wizard, but I don't think there's a better option. Fiddlesticks is also difficult. If Warlock were a class, that would obviously be him, but it's not. So what kind of class utilizes dark fearing magics for everything? And again, his whole thing is draining life force and healing himself, which we don't have a premise for in Pathfinder. Honestly, I even have all the classes out in front of me, and I've got nothing for Fiddlesticks. He's similar to Cho'Gath, where he's just kind of a monster. Oddly enough, I'm gonna go with Magus, especially since his rework a few years ago. He now has an ability where he does imbue his scythe with magic and slash through people, silencing them and dealing increased damage. Sure, he can still cast normal spells like summoning crows and draining life, but that fact that he can empower his scythe makes me think Magus, and it's the closest thing I've got. Fiora's a swashbuckler, easy. Interestingly, I think Fizz is also a swashbuckler with some kind of spellcasting archetype, specifically Druid, I think. I think Fizz is a swashbuckling Druid. He clearly has an animal companion that he can summon like the shark, and he has basic water magic, but overall he's just very slippery. He's in, he's out, he's up, he's down. That song that exists for teenage girls in the 90s. Galio, very similar to Braum. He's a champion. He has some magic. He's just a big, beefy boy. He can jump to his allies when need be and put the slowdown on all of his enemies, control the battlefield, which is exactly what a champion does. Gangplank is a gunslinger, nice and easy. He is specifically Way of the Drifter. There's no way around it. He has a sword and a gun. That is literally Way of the Drifter. Garen, very similar to Darius, he's just a great sword fighter. Their builds are honestly incredibly similar. They even take a lot of cleave so they can spin in circles and hit everybody at once. Maybe Garen takes an archetype of champion for the divine magic he clearly has, but that might be more of a homebrew thing. Like seriously, Garen doesn't even smite people for a deity. He smites people out of pride for his homeland. Gnar is tough. He's not even a beastkin, he's just an animal. And he can shapeshift, but it's just into a bigger version of himself. I guess it would be similar to playing like a beastkin Order of the Wild druid, if you're like half wolf, but you can also shapeshift into a wolf. It's really tough to say. I do think druid is the way to go with Gnar. He has some martial prowess, he can throw a boomerang, but when his ult comes up and he shapeshifts, he's all about his natural weapons, and that's basically how Order of the Wild druids work. They'll use their basic simple weapons while they're not shapeshifted, and then rely on their natural weapons when they are. I don't know what class Gragas is, but he obviously worships Cait and Kayleon. He might be a champion. No lie, Gragas might be a champion who uses a barrel of grog as a weapon, because he controls the battlefield, very similar to Galio. He slows down enemies, he knocks them away. He doesn't have a lot of protection for his allies, but he has a lot of deterrent for the opponent, and I think that's just the best bet. Graves is a Way of the Vanguard gunslinger. Like, the gunslingers in this are incredibly precise. I don't even need to explain them. He has a big shotgun, he dashes, he gets bonus armor, he knocks people around. That's perfect. He has the smoke curtain feat. Gwen is a Nightmare of Homebrew amalgam? I think I'd have to go Magus for Gwen. Gwen is a Magus where the player said, GM, can I use the stats for a greatsword? But my weapon is a giant pair of scissors. Also, I'm a Magus. Hecarim is difficult. Again, he's that other species, four-legged, much more of a monster. It might be easiest just to say Hecarim's a monk with monastic weaponry. That speed! I know I keep relying on the speed to defend monks, but aside from swashbucklers, which he's definitely not, Monk just makes the most sense. He attacks incredibly quickly, he spins his thing, which could be considered a flurry of blows. If there's two enemies next to you and you have a Monk spear, you could spin it to hit both of them with your flurry of blows. Oddly enough, I think Hecarim's a Monk. Heimerdinger, Construct Inventor, easy. I think Illaoi is some kind of oracle. It's difficult because she's so physically inclined, but all of her power comes from magic. Pulling these tentacles, pulling souls out of people, summoning tentacles of spirit tentacles to slam into people. It's very magic focused, but there's not a lot that combines the magic and the physical that's not a Magus, because she's not a Magus. The damage, she's not combining spells with her weapon, she's attacking and having magic aid her. I think Illaoi is a barbarian instinct that doesn't exist yet. Like, an ancient instinct or something like that, where she fights as her barbarian self, but calls upon ancient spirits to help her. And there is the ghost instinct, whatever it's called, but that's not the same thing. These are doing physical damage. They're not ghosts dealing negative damage. These are spirit tentacles slamming the ground with very real impact. So I'm gonna say Illaoi is a barbarian, but we don't have an instinct to describe her yet. Irelia, I think, is a flurry melee ranger. She attacks so quickly. She attacks, she dashes, she attacks, she dashes. Yes, the dash could be used to argue monk, which is a fair point. Maybe it's a monk with an archetype, but I like to think ranger because she attacks so incredibly quickly with all of her abilities, and she's very 1v1 focused, much like the ranger, because the ranger only gets all their benefits from attacking their hunted prey. I think Irelia is a melee flurry ranger. Ivern's a druid, nice and easy. I think Janna's a sorcerer. I don't think Janna's a druid. It could be really easy to be like, yeah, Janna's an Order of the Storm druid, but I think I'd prefer an elemental sorcerer with wind. I think an air elemental sorcerer makes more sense for Janna. I don't know her lore totally, but she doesn't come across as a big druid, you know? She comes across very much as magic first, source second, which to me is oftentimes how sorcerers roll, you know? This is my magic, I get it from my blood. Whereas druids are like, this is the land, it gives me magic. So, Janna, I'm going with air elemental sorcerer. Jarvan IV, probably a fighter. probably a long-reach spear fighter. I don't think he's a champion. He can give allies a little bit of a shield, but it mostly helps him and slows enemies. There's an argument both ways, but with how much damage he does and that fierce weapon, I'm going with fighter for Jarvan. I'm also going for fighter with Jax, as he is canonically a character who, if given a real weapon, which is probably his specialist weapon as a fighter, which is legendary proficiency, he would beat the crap out of everybody. The fact that he can still win fights with a lamp post means he sure does have fighter weapon proficiency. You could also argue Monk if he uses stabs and stuns people and all that. Monk is a valid argument, but I'm going to go with Fighter for his overall just combat efficiency. Jace is a weapon inventor. He has created a hammer that turns into a cannon. That is classic inventor. Jhin is another way of the sniper gunslinger, but built a bit differently. Whereas Caitlyn is built to basically shoot repeatedly from long range, Jhin makes every single shot count. I think in an actual gameplay scenario, Caitlyn would be shooting twice per round and reloading between them, whereas Jhin would be shooting once per round, maybe taking the two actions to line the shot up and then fire, rather than firing as much as possible. Jinx, on the other hand, is a lot harder. It would be so easy to just call her a gunslinger, but she attacks so fast. None of the gunslinger... Okay, some of the gunslinger subclasses are based on attacking super fast, but those are all with one-handed pistols. Jinx uses both two-handed guns, a rocket launcher and a Gatling gun, and only one class would work to attack super fast with those, and that is the Flurry Ranger. The Flurry Ranger is honestly incredibly diverse in ways you can play it, but if you're going to be attacking as fast as possible, Flurry Ranger is the best way to go. Kai'Sa is kind of difficult because she just shoots void energy at people, but it looks like it's coming out of technology. I would almost call her an armor inventor that took the feat that lets you get a weapon innovation on your armor. I think that exists. I could be remembering totally wrong. But she has like rocket launchers and stuff, but it's all on her armor. Even when you look at her auto attack, she's basically shooting things out of the wrists of her armor. So I'm gonna go with armor inventor. A, because we haven't had one yet, and B, because otherwise I would have no idea what to classify her as. Callista is interesting. Callista almost feels like a ranged swashbuckler. I know this isn't something that technically works, but between her mobility with the throw, hop, throw, hop, throw, hop, it feels like her getting panache, and having a literal finisher that rips all of her spears out of someone. I don't think the support exists for it in Pathfinder 2e right now, but I'm calling Callista a ranged swashbuckler. Karma's a key-focused monk. She doesn't have a lot of physical martial prowess, but she just dove headfirst, maxing her wisdom and taking every key-focus spell she can get. I mean, she basically has the one that's like a Kamehameha, just a giant glob of energy that explodes on impact. That exists. Karthus is a necromancer wizard. Easy enough. He just takes damaging negative energy spells. Kassadin gets a bit tough, because similar to Kai'Sa, his abilities are all just manipulating void energy, which isn't inherently magic, but in the case of Pathfinder 2e, I think we have to consider it that way. Also, his signature ability to teleport is a little bit uncommon. He does have some armor like Kai'Sa, but that's mostly just to sustain himself on the material plane. That doesn't assist him much in his abilities, so I think I'm gonna have to cop out and go with Sorcerer. He gets the magic just from being Voidborn himself, so it's coming from his bloodline, effectively. Bloodline, in quotes. But, you know, he didn't study this like a wizard. He wasn't gifted this from a patron, I don't think, because I don't think the Void has a patron. The Void is just its own realm. So, yeah. I'm gonna go with like a homebrewed void-touched sorcerer. Katarina would be really easy to say rogue, but she can do so much. She warps to people, she throws daggers, she can attack multiple people at the same time. I bet there's a way to build a rogue like this. I don't know how off the top of my head, but I think it would be a crime not to give Katarina rogue. I mean, a lot of rogues can hide and then reappear really fast. It's not quite the Shunpo disappearing act she pulls, but I do think that rogue fits her best. I don't think she's a swashbuckler. I don't think she's a monk. Rogue works the best here. Kayle is one of two things. Kayle is either a champion, a paladin champion, or she is a battle cleric. Whatever it's called. Oh my god, I don't even know the name of the subclass because nobody talks about it. War Priest, that's the one. I forgot the War Priest. I actually do think Kayle is a War Priest. Sure, she has the heal, which could be lay on hands, but she also has the ability to augment her weapon. She can fly. She has a lot of holy magic. She can blast an opponent with holy magic. That just screams cleric. I think she is a War Priest with a longsword who has some spells that can slow and whatnot. There could definitely be an argument made for champion, especially because she auto-attacks more than she casts spells, but champions don't get that much magic, especially the ability to turn invulnerable, which again I think is something a cleric could do at higher levels. Kayn is a rogue with some horrible homebrew BS. Kayn is a player that plays a rogue and wants sneak attack and asks, GM, can I have a magic item that lets me walk through walls for a limited time? And then later in the middle of combat, when he pops out of a wall to attack an enemy, he looks at the GM and goes, he couldn't have seen me in the wall. So he's flat-footed, right? Ken is a monk, and Pathfinder with Secrets of Magic just added in the Elementalist options for monk, so Kennen is straight up just an elemental feat-taking monk. Easy. Kha'zix is another tough one, but I think this works. Kha'zix, now hear me out, is a ranger. First off, Kha'zix is a hunter. His whole thing is finding his prey, isolating it, and then chunking it in one hit with his Q. You know what else does that? Precision Edge Rangers. Kha'zix is a Precision Edge hunter, ranger, whatever we're talking about at this point, where he just jumps on you and deals bonus damage because you're alone, which is what the Precision Ranger wants. Kindred is difficult. Kindred could be a ranger with an animal companion, but the animal companion is so inherently magical and linked to Kindred. Now, the hard part is that obviously the wolf of Kindred can't be attacked, but I think it would be a crime not to call Kindred a summoner with the wolf as her eidolon. Sure, it can't be attacked, but she uses it to fight alongside her, and they do work together very magically combined, and there's no way that's a ranger. Now, Kled, on the other hand, Kled is 100% an outwit ranger. Kled runs in, riding his animal companion. He definitely has the cavalier archetype, runs in on the animal companion, and just confuses his enemies. He rolls on top of them, he pushes them around, he's super hard to kill, and remember that outwit does give you a bonus to armor class. It just works out perfect. Oh, these void creatures, you're making my life so hard. Kog'Maw! See, champions like Kog'Maw are so impossible because they have a natural weapon. He spits his stomach acid at people. That is what he does. Even all three of his damaging spells are just spitting stomach acid in different ways. I'm gonna cheat a little bit here. I think Kog'Maw is a summoner's eidolon. I do not think there is any way to build a character to be like Kog'Maw. However, you could build a beast or some kind of summoner eidolon, give it the extra ranged attack, you can take the augment that allows you to change the damage type, you can take the feats that let your eidolon cast spells, and you can have this void beast that has a ranged spit attack and cast spells like Acid Arrow. That is where I'm going with it. Kog'Maw is the eidolon of a summoner, which I guess makes him a summoner. LeBlanc is just an illusionist wizard. Any questions? Lee Sin's just a monk. Any questions? Leona's just a paladin. Any questions? Lilia's just a druid. Any questions? Lyssandra's more complicated. Lysandra is literally like made of ice, born of ice, molded by ice, so it's gotta be sorcerer, right? You know, again, she didn't learn how to cast ice magic. I guess she could be an ice elementalist druid? She is trying to protect the land, or is she the one trying to conquer the lands? Hold on, we're gonna need to go into lore to solve this one. Okay, interesting. So Lysandra is known as the Ice Witch, but she doesn't have a familiar. And every witch has a familiar, but she's also evil. Like, she is twisting ice into something dark and powerful. As a corrupter of nature, I don't think she's a druid. I think sorcerer is much more akin to what she is. She has the magic to control the ice, but she's not here to defend it. She's here to corrupt it and use it to her own advantage, which I feel is very sorcerer. Lucian, there's our pistolero gunslinger. Lulu, there's our druid. Can druids learn polymorph? Yeah, druids can learn polymorph. Lulu heals, she turns people into rodents, she literally casts enlarge on her allies, Lulu is a druid. Meanwhile, Lux is a divine sorcerer, very focused on damaging spells. Lux is 100% a sorcerer. She was born with her magic and can literally control light, which is very offensive divine spell list. Malphite's a rock. Honestly, I'm going to cheat a little with this one too. Malphite is a Stone Instinct Barbarian, which is available on my Patreon right now for anyone who pledges $10 or more. Additionally, you can get access to early Sinclair's Library playtest material if you pledge $10 or more. There's some available right now. The cursed archetypes are available for your playtest. If you want to pledge $10, you will get access to it instantly. Link in the description. Malzahar is another difficult one. Yes, he summons things, but he's not intrinsically linked to his summoned creature. I think he's a conjuration wizard who just uses void magic. Things like the circle of damage on the ground, I think it's a lot of homebrewed existing spells like Molten Orb, just making it negative energy instead of fire. A little bit of homebrew, you can make Malzahar pretty easily. Maokai's just a Konrasu druid, nice and simple. Let's face it, as much as we want Master Yi to be some kind of special sword monk, he's just a fighter. The amount of times he crits, how fast he can attack, maybe you could defend Flurry Ranger, but I honestly think he's just a katana fighter. Misfortune is the same as Lucian, a pistol arrow gunslinger. Oh god, Mordekaiser? How do I give a class to something that hits the ground really hard and rips out the souls of his enemies? I think he has to be a magus. One of his strongest abilities is the ability to slam the ground with such magical force that if it only hits one target, that target is destroyed. And I think that screams Magus with a spell infused in his mace. There's a lot more to it. He can still cast spells, they just happen to be necromantic in nature. And honestly, a necromancy Magus is something I hadn't thought of before. Kinda seems cool. Morgana's another one I would love to just say witch or good, but it's not true. She doesn't have a familiar. Morgana controls dark energy. Now this is different from the void, but similar for the point of giving her a class. She just has magic. I think she's just a wizard. I know we keep defaulting to wizard, but she doesn't summon anything. Maybe she's an oracle? She could possibly be an oracle with some kind of mystery that connects her to the darker netherworld or whatever, but for simplicity's sake, I'm just gonna say wizard. Also for simplicity's sake, Nami's a druid, water elementalist. Nasus is another tough one, because again, he's a melee character. Everything he does is hit stuff, but he still has magic. He can summon a burning field, a burning circle on the ground, but he also infuses his attack with necromantic energy, meaning I think he's the exact same as Mordekaiser. I think he's a necromancy-focused magus, because all of his power comes from buffing himself up and then hitting someone really hard with a spell-infused weapon. Now here's a question. Is Nautilus a champion or an armor inventor? I want to go with Armor Inventor, especially because he has the anchor. He can reach out and hook people in with his anchor, which is something that no champion could do. Inventors technically can't either, but I'm sure you could homebrew something without getting ridiculous. I do think Nautilus is an Armor Inventor, just because I love the thought of that. Nico's another shape-shifting druid, and guess what? So is Nidalee. Nocturne's a rogue. He literally blinds you and shows up behind you. What is more rogue? Nunu and Willump! Earlier when I was talking about a character who is very obviously a summoner, Nunu and Willump. They share a health bar. Willump does most of the work with Nunu the summoner riding on his back, giving him directions. It's perfectly clear as day. Olaf, Fury Instinct Barbarian with 2 axes. Orianna, Ancestry is obviously an android, but she's probably more of a wizard. I mean, her attacks are literally a ball moves into you and lets out an electric shockwave. I would believe that the player would be able to homebrew this, saying, all my spells originate from this ball, but it has a range, they all come from me. You know, all the spells work the same, but I have a magical spell ball that does it for me. Ornn is tough, because he's a crafter at heart, but he's obviously not an alchemist. He's either a fighter or a barbarian, maybe a champion. Honestly, if there were neutral champions in Pathfinder 2e, I bet Ornn would fit that role. He's there to protect people, but he's not doing it necessarily for good or evil. He's doing it to show off his craftsmanship and whatnot, which would be an awesome way to play a neutral champion. So I'm gonna say it. I'm gonna say Ornn is a neutral champion. They just don't exist yet in Pathfinder. Pantheon's a spear and shield fighter. Nice. Poppy probably should be a fighter. but I do like that she uses a hammer that's too big for her body, so she's gonna be a giant instinct barbarian. Now, she doesn't get any bigger, but those are optional feats, so just because she's giant instinct doesn't mean she needs to take the feats that make her bigger. She just uses a hammer that is as big as her body. Pyke is a rogue, really good at sneaking off, disappearing, and popping back up when you least expect him. He does have the ultimate ability that executes people, and it makes me think, why do D&D and Pathfinder 2e not have many execute effects? I know D&D 5e has a magic item that's like, if you critically hit and their health is below 100, you automatically kill them. I think that'd be cool, like a weapon that just, if you drop their health below this much, it's an instant kill. Kind of a cool idea. Qiyana's probably an elementalist druid. She has a weapon, which is why I don't say sorcerer. She has a lot of different abilities based on whatever element she's using, so I think she is an elementalist druid who uses them all equally. Quinn's a precision ranger with an animal companion. Simple as day, she throws the animal companion out, which marks the target or hunts the prey, and then her first shot on that target deals bonus damage. Precision. Rakan is our first, actual bard. I know we made Cho'Gath a bard, and I hate it, but Rakan is obviously a bard. High charisma, he runs around, he charms people, he heals people, it just screams bard. You're really gonna make me give a class to Rammus? A turtle who rolls around and bumps into people and taunts them? I guess he's a champion, but taunting isn't a thing in Pathfinder, and neither is rolling up into a ball. How am I supposed to give him a class? I'm just gonna say champion. These monsters, Rek'Sai, what, you burrow down? I'm gonna cheat again. Rek'Sai is another Eidolon. You could do it. You can give your Eidolon a burrow speed as well as a ranged attack and melee attacks, and that's what Rek'Sai is. Similar to Kog'Maw, Rek'Sai is the Eidolon of a summoner. Dude, Rel is an armor inventor who has been homebrewed to hell and back. Excuse me, GM, I would like to augment my armor so that when I jump in the air, it turns into a horse underneath me. Sure, what does that do? It makes me faster and lowers my armor class. I like it, don't get me wrong, it's a cool idea, and that's exactly what Rel is. Renekton's just a fighter with whatever weapon he has. I guess you could say he's a barbarian, because his ultimate makes him big and do damage that could be rage. It does give him more health, too. No, yeah, barbarian. Renekton's definitely a barbarian, strictly because of his ult. Rengar's gonna go in the exact same classification as Kha'Zix, with the precision-based melee hunter. He jumps out of nowhere and deals bonus damage to you with his Q, just right there on the money, that first hit. That's everything he does. Riven's just a fighter. What can I say? When a character's abilities are just swing sword harder, swing sword hardest, that's just fighter. Rumble's an armor inventor. Done. Can you guys guess what class Ryze is? It's boring, but Samira's also like Gangplank, just a way of the Drifter Gunslinger. She has a sword, she has a pistol. It just makes too much sense. More interestingly, I think Sejuani is an elementalist druid with the Cavalier archetype. She has a lot of magic. She can freeze people, she can detonate the ice, she can throw projectiles that explode into ice, all very magical focused, all while having a large boar to ride. Senna, how are you gonna make this so difficult for me? You're a gunslinger, but all of your damage is magic, negative energy? What is that? I do think she's a way of the sniper gunslinger. Everything she does is from really far away, but she has a lot of magic. So she must have some kind of archetype. Maybe a wizard, just for things like fog cloud and stuff, because she can make a big thing of mist that everyone can hide inside, but she also heals, so maybe it's like a cleric gunslinger? I don't know. I hate Senna. Seraphine's a bard, because she's just Sona, and we'll talk more when we get to Sona. Set's ooh, here's a question for you. Is Set a monk, or is Set an unarmed fighter? I'm gonna go with monk because he has a bunch of abilities that give him a shield when he does it, which is very much in tune with the monk's unarmored defense, and he's incredibly defensive as a character, whereas fighters are all out offense focused, so Set's defensive abilities definitely put him into the monk category, but boy, I wish he was an unarmed fighter. Shaco's a rogue. Really? Shen's an interesting one. Shen could be considered a rogue, or a monk, or a fighter. I think I'm gonna go with monk, with a mix of ki and size, because I think he attacks with size. I don't remember the exact weapon he uses, but it's very monastic weaponry. He has a little bit of magic, especially protective magic with his shields and whatnot. So with Shen, I'm going to go with a monk that kind of balances martial with ki magic. Siobhan is a Dragon Instinct Barbarian. Like the easiest on the list. She turns into a dragon, she breathes fire, she can attack things and hit them really hard with bonus fire damage. She's just a Dragon Instinct Barb. Singed! We got an Alchemist! I mean, honestly, is there any other class that's gonna work for Singed? I really do like the idea of a mutagen or something that gives you increased movement speed and leaves like difficult terrain behind you, where if enemies walk through it, they take poison damage. That would be a really cool mutagen for Pathfinder. Scion's just another Fury Instinct Barbarian. Maybe you could argue Spirit Instinct, especially because he can like come back from the dead a little bit, but I think most of what he does is just gets really, really mad. Sivir's a Flurry Ranger. She happens to have a big old boomerang homebrewed weapon because she cheats, and you know, with her ultimate giving her attack speed and most of what she does attacking multiple targets with Ricochet, that's very Flurry Ranger. These monsters, how many more monsters are there? Skarner doesn't have a class, I guess. Champion? That doesn't make any sense though. He can only protect himself. He can freeze people in melee, which is not something that exists in Pathfinder. I hate doing it. I really don't want to keep doing it, but he's an Eidolon. He's an Eidolon with a ranged attack and some special homebrewed ability to drag people around. He's just an athletics-based Eidolon. It's a summoner who took an Eidolon with really high strength and is going heavy into athletics for it so he can grab and shove people around. Sona's a bard. All of her abilities play songs in an AoE around her that give people buffs. What more is there to say? Soraka, classic cleric, has a few offensive spells, she heals, and she heals. She is just a classic heal bot cleric. Swain is interesting. Swain could be a druid. He controls birds, like a lot of birds. But I want to say he's more of a nature, primal spellcasting sorcerer. Yeah, he can control these birds, but there are spells that summon hordes of animals to attack people, and I think that's what he's got. Now, this doesn't explain any of his massive healing potential, but as I've said before, Pathfinder doesn't really have a lot of self-healing, so I'm going to go with a primal nature spell list sorcerer. Silas, I don't even know what you are. You're everybody. You just steal abilities. That doesn't exist. Like, he just runs around, smacks people with chains, and then steals their abilities. I don't know how to put this in a class. No, you know what? I'm gonna rely on you. Leave in the comments, what class is Silas? Because I've got nothing. I can't even make him an Eidolon. I can't even cheat. What is he? Syndra's a sorcerer. She's just a one-trick pony sorcerer who puts the same spell into every spell slot. They're basically magic missile. With her ult, they don't miss. I think she's just a sorcerer who puts magic missile in every spell slot. Tahm Kench, I think I can actually classify. Tahm Kench is an animal instinct barbarian who took frog as their animal. He has the reaching tongue attack. He has some fancy stuns in there, which I think there are some barbarian feats that could slightly imitate. He's a barbarian. Now, obviously, he doesn't rage, but it's the closest thing I got. Look, bear with me. Talia. Elementalist Druid. I mean, I don't know how I can keep doing this, but it's a really easy cop-out for these elemental characters. Now, Talon is interesting. Talon could be a rogue, but he's honestly incredibly martially adept, and his weapons, like the bladed cloak, that's not a simple weapon. I think Talon is either a fighter or a swashbuckler. I'm gonna say swashbuckler. His ability to leap over walls and reposition insanely, disappear and turn invisible, it's very swashbuckler. He doesn't have any exact panache effects, but I think it's the closest thing we've got. Now, if we're talking champion, Taric is 100% the champion. He can heal like lay on hands. He can stun, which doesn't really get explained, but he's just there for you. He picks an ally, and he can almost, as a reaction, basically, stop the enemy in their tracks with his stun, because it originates from the ally. It's really cool, and I like it. Redeemer, specifically, because with the stun, you can almost think of it as the choice the enemy has to make, where they either become clumsy, or they do no damage at all. Teemo, why do I have to classify you? Teemo's an alchemist. I thought this was going to be tough, but no, Teemo's just a toxicologist alchemist. He even has the feat that if he shoots you, even if it does no damage, you still get poisoned and your health ticks away. His mushrooms are just a fun homebrewed version of like a bomb or a poison bomb that he was allowed to leave on the ground, and when someone steps on it, kaboom! Simple. Ironically, I think Thresh is also a champion. He's just a champion who uses a whip, which is super cool. And now that we have evil champions, the ability to lock someone down is very similar to, I believe, the Tyrant, which can force someone to kneel. It's not the exact same thing, but Thresh hooking you, flying to you, and whipping you in place where you cannot act for any of that, very similar to being like magically forced to kneel down. It's the closest thing I got. Tristan is another tough one that I think could be a Flurry Ranger because she attacks so fast, but I'm gonna go with a Vanguard. She specifically has abilities that allow her to dash into the heat of combat. She has a massive cannon that blasts people backwards, all things that the Vanguard can do, and I don't know if it's as accurate to her playstyle, but it is very accurate to her character. I think Trundle's a Spirit Instinct Barbarian. A lot of what he does is like empowered by the souls of his ancestors. This doesn't quite explain his ability to steal the life essence of other people and use it against them, but that would be a cool Spirit Instinct feat if you could steal part of your target's soul to empower your rage. That'd be super cool. I think it's the closest thing we've got. Tryndamere. Barbarian. Fury Instinct. There is no argument. Twisted Fate's easy. He's a ranged Magus. He's a shooting star Magus who just uses cards as his weapon, which are an actual weapon in Pathfinder 2e. You can literally make Twisted Fate, you'll just have limited spell slots because Magus only gets 4 spell slots per day. But yeah, you fill them with different spells and you are throwing spells at them and it's super cool. Twitch is tough. I think Twitch is a crossbow rogue with the alchemist archetype to make some poisons. I think he poisons his darts and shoots them off from hiding, getting the sneak attack damage. It really works out. Udyr, Druid, Urgot, probably an armor inventor. It's tough because a lot of these mechanical characters have special augmented armor and weapons, but the fact that he has the special like crab legs to move around on and his gun is just a gun basically, I'm gonna go with armor inventor. Varus is a precision ranger. He's not that great at like consistent combat, but man, he lands that one arrow on you. That's all he needs. That precision bonus damage arrow feels great. Conversely, Vayne is a flurry ranger. She has some BS homebrew that every 3 times I hit a target, they actually lose a chunk of their max health, and the GM gave it to her for some reason. But that's what she does. She sits there and goes pew 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 pew. Done. Vhagar's a wizard. I wish he was more interesting because I love Vhagar, but he throws magic and does damage. That's all it is. He's an evocation wizard. Vel'Koz, on the other hand, is probably a sorcerer. Now, he's not a humanoid, but he was probably born with that void magic inside of him, so I'm gonna go with sorcerer. Very similar to Vhagar, he just uses it to do damage. Unfortunately, I would love to make him an investigator, because he's so curious and he's all about learning things, but sorcerer just makes all the sense for him. Vex is tough. I think I would just go sorcerer again. I'm sorry I'm saying sorcerer so much. It's just that sorcerer covers so many different sources of power, and she's just inherently shadow touched to throw around shadow magic in the shadow isles, so she's a shadow sorcerer. I don't make the rules. Vi, monk, or weapon inventor? I'm gonna let you decide in the comments. Viego, probably a magus. Yeah, he has this fancy sword, but it's always magic infused. It's doing all this special necromantic damage, and for the 3rd time, I guess it's a necromancy magus. I guess Riot Games just really likes dark energy weapons. Now, Victor, I think, is a whole new subclass of inventor that doesn't exist yet, but should. The Magitech Inventor, where you create objects that augment onto you that can cast imitations of spells. Because everything Victor does is very spell-like. He throws out the projectile that damages you. He shoots a laser, but it's all technology. I think that would be an awesome subclass for the Inventor. Paizo, get on that. Let the Inventor replicate spell effects with their inventions. Vladimir, don't say sorcerer, don't say sorcerer, don't say sorcerer, don't say damn pure sorcerer! I mean, hey, sorcerers do get their magic from there. Bloodline! Volibear is a bear animal instinct barbarian with the druid archetype to get the Order of Storms. Really cool combination. Warwick is also an animal instinct barbarian who chose wolf instead of bear. Wukong's just a fighter. He's a really creative fighter who chose staves, however you want to pronounce it. Wukong is a fighter who chose staff for his fighter weapon mastery and got really creative with it. Maybe took an archetype in rogue so that he could leave the decoy behind, hard to say. Xayah is tough, but I think I'm going to call Xayah a ranged monk. I know that right now, rules as written, you can only have a bow monk, but I think this would be a cool homebrewed alternative. You know, you would just have to flavor everything. It wouldn't change the damage. That because she grows infinite feathers, these feathers could be considered ranged monk weapons and used just like a short bow, which I think fits perfectly for Xayah. Xerath is tough. I wanted to put Xerath as a wizard, but Xerath is just a being of pure energy who always had that energy. It's not like he had to learn anything. So Xerath's gonna have to be a sorcerer. I know, I'm sick of saying sorcerer, but when blank character gets their power from blank obscure source, it's pretty much gonna be a sorcerer. You want to talk about fighters though, Xin Zhao. He runs at you and he hits you multiple times. Yasuo could also be considered a fighter, but I think I'm gonna go with Swashbuckler. He's all over the place, he's about being nimble, dashing through people, which some swashbucklers literally always try to do, and then his ultimate is just a fancy over-the-top finisher. Yasuo is a swashbuckler. Yone's just Yasuo, so he's also a swashbuckler. He just has a little bit more magic and the ability to teleport, which is kind of annoying. GM probably gave it to him because he asked. Yorick! I don't want to say another necromancy magus. I don't want to, believe me, but look at him! He's a magus who spends some of his spell slots conjuring creatures and the other ones empowering his shovel to deal bonus negative damage. What do you want from me? He's a necromancer magus. Yuumi is a cat. So interestingly, this is another one I'm going to cheat on. Don't worry, she's not an Eidolon. Yuumi's a familiar. Even in the game, she is a familiar. She has worse base stats than any character in the game. She is designed to attach to someone and never take real damage, but using her familiar abilities make that person's life easier. So yeah, Yuumi's not a witch. Yuumi's the familiar. Zach. Oh, no, wait, I can actually do this to Zach. I don't know what his base class is, probably fighter or barbarian, but he's got the Oozemorph archetype. That's a real thing from the Slithering. Zach is just like a fighter or a barbarian, maybe even a monk, because he just punches people with the Oozemorph archetype. Is there any lore about what he used to be like? No, he was never even a person. He's just all ooze all the time. So if the Oozemorph archetype were a class, that would be Zach. I'm gonna say monk, because his Q is like attack two things and slam them together. That's kind of like a flurry of blows. I'm going to say Zach is an Oozemorph monk. An ooze monk, if you would. Zed is a cheater. He throws out shadows, he teleports to shadows, he teleports all over the place. I think monk might be the only thing that makes sense, because rogues can't do that. Rogues can move a lot, but they can't oh my wamo shinderu behind you. Zed is just too fast. And the only way to think about that is the monk, who literally does get focus spells that let them teleport. And yes, he is a monk with the Shadowcaster archetype. I almost forgot that existed. Shadowcaster, you literally summon, control shadows, use shadow magic. You got Zed. Now Zeri's cool. Zeri is a gunslinger with a sorcerer archetype. The electric magic she has comes naturally to her and she imbues her weapons with it. So while she's mostly focused on shooting you in the face, she can also cast a lightning bolt occasionally. Or more likely, electric arc, electric arc, electric arc, electric arc, electric. Ziggs is a bomber alchemist. It's probably the easiest one on the list. Zillion is the poor player trying their hardest to play a chronomancer in a D20 system like D&D or Pathfinder, but there's just not enough spells that affect time. You know they take haste, you know they take slow, maybe they take wish to flavor it as time bending. But he's definitely a wizard. Zoe is surprisingly difficult because she's all over the place. That's like her character design. She can throw bubbles that put you to sleep. She can teleport for a second and blink back. She gets bonus damage to throw sparkles at you. and I don't know where that lands. She might be a Magus, all things considered. She might be a Magus that takes the sleep spell, but then also takes a few more damaging abilities, because all of her abilities, when she casts a spell, imbue her next auto attack with more damage. So she might be casting it with a cantrip, she might be entering Arcane Cascade, she might even be using the feat that allows her to imbue a weapon with a little bit of bonus damage based on the spell she cast. I didn't think it would go this way, but I think Zoe is a Magus. And finally, ended off nice and easy. Zyra's an Order of the Plant Druid.